What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla Kong Supernova News Roundup. In this video, we are continuing our chronological journey through the development and release of Godzilla Kong Supernova by talking about events that happened in April. And today we're going to be talking about one of the more niche aspects of the MonsterVerse, as well as something that, oh my god, we've waited for years to finally have this. I can't believe it took this long, but thankfully we finally got it. Either way, we're going to be talking about one of the more niche elements of the MonsterVerse, and something that gives me a lot of hope for the future. Something that made me very happy. Let's get into it. First of all, big shout out DevilJin2060 for being part of D-Force. Clearly had notifications on because he got to my last news video right away. Also, if you haven't seen my last Godzilla Kong News Roundup, we talk about a bunch of big production updates for Godzilla Kong Supernova, as well as the working title for the movie, Zeus, and we speculate on what that could mean. All the way from humanity trapping the Titans in Hollow Earth to a new space god coming down to take on Godzilla and Kong. But Daniel Kane 8136 had a theory that I thought was pretty cool, and that theory is that maybe the new working title Zeus has something to do with Kong having his new lightning powers. Of course, the Beast Glove gave Kong lightning powers, so maybe it could be a spin-off of that. I think that's a great theory. I also didn't really mention what if the theory has to do with Godzilla himself. In some ways, Godzilla himself being the king of the monsters is kind of like Zeus being the king of the gods, and Zeus of course trapped the Titans in Hollow Earth, and that's sort of what Godzilla does. And so maybe that's like a more literal direct correlation I could have made that I don't know how I didn't. But yeah, those are both good theories. I would personally be more hyped for Kong having lightning hands than it just simply being Godzilla. That's just me. Either way, starting out with some artwork like always. This first piece comes to us from Gary, and this is their legendary Godzilla meets My Goji. I love it. I think it's fantastic. It kind of reminds me of that old Godzilla PS4 intro cutscene where Godzilla 2014 meets the Heisei Godzilla. I love the background, the apocalyptic city, the smoke, the scale difference between the Godzilla. I think that's like a Godzilla 2019-ish Godzilla standing off against that poor -1 Godzilla. The guy would get slapped around by a MonsterVerse Godzilla, but boy do I think he'd go down swinging. I love the blue glowing out of his mouth, the atomic breath glowing up his back. It looks so sick, and having Godzilla with the glowing eye also looks epic. I think that this is an awesome one. It's a great art piece, and I really wanted to show it off. This next one, oh my lord, how do you even do something like this? M. Kirby over on Twitter has posted a ton of images and videos of this 8-bit fighting game they've made with Godzilla and a bunch of other kaiju and monsters, and recently they included Shimo and Mechagodzilla, and the way they translate to the 8-bit art style looks fantastic. I love seeing all the Mechagodzillas in this game. I love that they have other characters like Scylla in there and Gazora. They've got all sorts of stuff. It is very cool. They also have like videos showing off the way that this little custom fighting game works. It looks like so much fun. I love the old school vibes of it. I wish that companies would go out of their way to take some risks like making a game like this nowadays. That'd be so much fun to play. I know you guys would all love that too. This was something I found really interesting. This was posted by My Kaiju. The original King Kong vs. Godzilla fight has finally been uncovered after all these years. This came to us from an old manga called Tornado Kid, which was released in 1956, all the way back at Godzilla's inception, near 1954. This was made by Jiro Kuwata, and it features these two characters transforming. One of them transforms into Godzilla, and the other one transforms into a giant gorilla, although it's very clearly meant to be King Kong. It's like a clear King Kong stand-in. And I also found it interesting that the text specifically says, like, in this fight, no one will win. The two of them are evenly matched. Even as far back as 1956, authors were cool acknowledging that. I think that's very fun. Obviously, King Kong was the most iconic movie monster at the time, and Godzilla was the new guy on the block, so this is awesome to see. And I can't believe it's been undetected for all these years. Dr. Squatch is having a collaboration with Godzilla and Kong. There is a new Godzilla Grit and Kong Crush soap coming out. I don't know what Godzilla and Kong would smell like. I honestly don't know if I'm gonna get these either. They're probably expensive. I got the Dr. Squatch Batman soaps, and while they do smell nice, they are literally painful to use. It's a fun collaboration, goofy stuff. I do like the packaging a lot, and I do really like the colors of the soap, so that's at least pretty sweet. The Prime 1 Studios Godzilla vs. Shimo went up on sale. That incredible piece that runs for like $1,500 went up for sale. You can buy it now. There's new Kong Survivor Instinct updates. The game is getting a physical release. That's very exciting, I think, and as far as I'm aware, there's only a PS5 physical edition announced at the moment, but the fact that there is a physical edition is already exciting, I think. As a big proponent of physical media, I think that's amazing. Unfortunately, it is $55, which is considerably more expensive than the game was on Steam, and it is slated to release in September, so coming out well after the game originally came out for a price well more than the game is worth. As much as I love physical media, and as much as I stand by physical media, and I think it's far superior than digital media, that's kind of ridiculous. I don't know why it would be that expensive, to be honest, but I guess it's kind of cool nonetheless. This is kind of an unusual main topic for me to cover, but I really wanted to spend some time with this interview because it gave me so much clarity and hope for the future of the MonsterVerse in such little but very important ways. Toho Kingdom writer Brian Elston sat down and did an interview on Godzilla X Kong Titan Chasers. For those of you who don't know, Godzilla X Kong Titan Chasers, it's a newer mobile game set in the world of the MonsterVerse. You can download it now. I know it's very popular. I know that there's a lot of people who absolutely love this game and stand by it and think it's fantastic. I've talked about the trailers on this channel in the past, and I generally think it looks pretty awesome. Especially the cinematic trailers, I think, turned out great. But this interview goes really in depth on the making of that game, and I think it gives us a really good indication of the hands that the MonsterVerse are currently in, which I think is really interesting. So this Toho Kingdom interview was conducted with Louisa Gailey, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that name, the chief creative officer over at Hunted Cow Games. This is the developer of Godzilla Kong Titan Chasers. In this, we learned that first of all, they started working with Legendary through Tilting Point before Godzilla vs. Kong was released. This has been in the pipeline since before 2021. This actually checks out with what we heard about Kong Survivor Instinct as well. Kong Survivor Instinct was greenlit and moved into production before Godzilla vs. Kong was released, which is why there's a big scale issue with Kong in that game. The fact that things are in the MonsterVerse pipeline for so long I find incredibly interesting. Also, Monarch Legacy of Monsters was in the pipeline since 2019, so clearly there's a bit of a backup. I do know that there is a general idea on where things can head in the future, and I'm so curious to see what else pops up, given that we have information like the fact that Titan Chasers has been in the works since 2021. They talk a lot about knowing their fan base, knowing who was going to be playing the game, and trying really hard to cater to that. So in this interview, they explained that they worked really hard to include multiple styles of combat in both multiplayer and single player versions of the game, so that you could have man versus man, man versus monster, monster versus man, and monster versus monster combat. They of course know that fans are going to want to play as the monsters, but they also know that nerds like myself would get kind of picky about the way that that all works. This is an instance where this game in particular, I don't think anybody would really be questioning the lore of this game, especially as we'll talk about in a minute. This game did something that no one else has outwardly done and has gained my respect more than any other MonsterVerse project other than the films and Legacy of Monsters. We'll get there. I'm very happy about it. But I don't think many people would have picked holes in the lore, but they were so conscious of the lore, which shows that somebody cares. There are people who are really passionate about the MonsterVerse who are getting to work on these MonsterVerse projects, and this is an instance where somebody working on the MonsterVerse really cared about the lore and the world that they were building. So they explained that they wanted the Titans to be in the game, but the Titans aren't like Pokemon. You're not going to be able to play Titans like Pokemon, and it also didn't make sense to play as the Titans full time, and so they included the Orca M in this game, building off of the lore of King of the Monsters. And that's a thing that they have worked really hard on, is building off of the lore of the MonsterVerse movies and justifying their game through the films themselves. We heard the same thing with Kong Survivor Instinct, including the Orca Sigma. I think it's so great that somebody is trying to build off of the world of King of the Monsters in a meaningful way. They explained that they wanted a human perspective in this game because it opened the door to the base building aspect of this game, which is really the bulk of it, and allowed for them to include some world building. It shows different ways that society has adapted to monsters and lets you study the monsters from a human perspective. I also love that they have a really deep knowledge of the lore of the MonsterVerse as is. They shout out Kong's wart dog traps and how Kong is able to build these constructs in Hollow Earth, and they joke about how well Kong's pretty capable with all that. It still doesn't compare to the outpost design in this game and on the Siren Isles. Clearly people knew what they were doing when they were working on this. They explained that the basic general pitch for this game was to make a game about monster storm chasers, which is obviously where the Titan Chasers title comes from. They say that they came up with the Siren Isles because they wanted the monsters to be able to free roam and have city-smashing battles without regular civilians or geography getting involved. They did consider setting this game in the Hollow Earth, but again, they were so conscious of the world that they were playing in. They feel that Hollow Earth is a hard thing to access, as it's explained in Godzilla vs. Kong. It is a hard thing to get to, and so it wouldn't make sense for these casual people to be able to get into the world of Hollow Earth. So instead, to play by the MonsterVerse's rules, they created the Siren Isles, which they explained were formed during the rise of the Titans, as caused by natural and unnatural disasters stemming from Ghidorah's brief reign. Again, trying really hard to build off the lore of this universe. I really like when people try really hard to play by the rules, and this game is doing that. For some reason, I don't know how this works if the islands are newer, they explained that they included ruins from former civilizations on the islands and a couple vortexes, including the center vortex, which is a hotspot for Titan activity and allows the super species on the islands to flourish. They said that they actually had a lot of freedom in creating their own super species for this game. They tried to take inspiration from myths and worked really hard to not go either too horror or too fantasy with the creatures. Instead, they wanted to take inspiration from myth as their compass and then create monsters that feel grounded and like natural creatures that could exist, just the same as they did for the MonsterVerse movies. They say that the flora fauna of Skull Island was a big inspiration, as well as Rodan's biovolcanic nature. A random game dev shouting out Rodan's biovolcanic nature. It's giving me so much hope that the MonsterVerse has finally found its comfort zone. I'm sure this game had major involvement from the MonsterVerse's mythology team, so it seems like we're finally hitting our stride here. Through this, it led to creatures like the Vault Panther, Magma Jackal, and Sporefly. They said that Legendary was involved in every step of the way throughout this game. Legendary made sure that everything was kept in the boundaries of the broader world of the MonsterVerse, while also pushing the game in terms of pushing the tech in universe so that it could have more of a sci-fi feel, and also because the MonsterVerse continues to go more sci-fi heavy with bigger and broader tech in each film. The game is set just before the events of Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, and I love that somebody finally acknowledges this. They explain it as set in its own timeline. It is not set in the timeline of the movies, and this is what we need more of. More transparency on what is and is not canon. This game is inspired by canon, but it isn't canon. Monarch G-Team, which O'Shea Jackson Jr. and Chris Mujahangir over at Toho Kingdom want to do, same deal. It's a show set in a world similar to the MonsterVerse that is not the MonsterVerse itself. I love that we can have stories set inspired by the MonsterVerse that are not in the MonsterVerse. It's a really great way to tell stories with these characters without ruining the movies, and this is what we need more of. I love this so much. So they explain that future events of the game will progress a little differently than the films themselves, but they will try to incorporate elements from the films into the game as it goes on. They said that the team working on the narrative for this game is made up of hardcore MonsterVerse fans, and I can very much tell through this interview. They remembered that the Titans aren't monsters, they're animals. None of them are actually evil. I like that they say other than the Skullcrawlers. Take that, Skullcrawlers. And so they decided to add an enemy faction into this game so that there could be a villain of this game without vilifying the monsters themselves, which I also think is amazing. Clearly paying tribute to the early days of the MonsterVerse when the monsters were more animalistic and less full-blown cartoon character. They say that lots of time was spent developing the characters, their backstories, their access to technology, how they fight monsters, and so on, and they worked really hard for a lot of these characters, especially on the character Kenzo, who is a former G-Team member who has connections to Monarch, and through this, he's the game's main leader and protagonist. They also tried really hard to tie the backstories of the other characters to the history of the MonsterVerse itself, such as making Reagan a firefighter from San Francisco. They say that they have future plans and expansions to add to this game, including more chasers. And then they say they're treating this game like a series of episodes, and with each episode, new lore will be built onto the world of the game. They say they don't currently have any plans to bring any film characters into the game because it would require actors' permissions and a lot of extra steps, but that they like the idea, which also makes me wonder how Kong Survivor Instinct was able to use Jonah Allen who looked just like Charles Dance. Is that maybe another hint that Charles Dance has given permission to continue using his likeness in the MonsterVerse and maybe will return? I don't know. I feel like if he was going to return, he maybe would have returned for that game, but maybe they didn't have the money for the voice acting. Either way, it gives me hope that we might see Jonah Allen again as well, just because that means that Charles Dance had to at least approve his likeness being used in that game, unless he signed a contract which was like, we get to use your likeness in perpetuity without your knowledge, which would suck for him. They also say, and I really respect this, that they don't want to focus on microtransactions for cosmetics, but instead would rather build the world of the game, add new characters and creatures. They then say that they have future plans to expand to the Hollow Earth in this game, although they don't really have plans to expand to Skull Island because by the time this game is set, they remembered that it has been completely destroyed, and so it's really not considered outside of maybe doing some flashbacks. They say that they will do collabs in the future. I guess they did a collab with the Boba Box recently, and then they say that they take the responsibility of being the largest dedicated MonsterVerse game on mobile very seriously. Finally, they tease that Scar King and Shimo will be heading to the Siren Isles very soon. I think that all sounds fantastic. That all gets me very hype. Very clearly, there are passionate creators who are working on the MonsterVerse who care so much about the lore, and they didn't learn this by themselves, which shows that somebody at Legendary is finally getting a grip on what the story and lore of the MonsterVerse is in order to help guide these game devs through this. And I also think you can see a little bit of that in the new Godzilla Kong Supernova teaser, which has a stronger emphasis on lore than we saw in the New Empire itself, with mentions to Rick Stanton building directly off the world of New Empire, and even tie-ins to the comics themselves. I think we are finally hitting our stride in the MonsterVerse, knowing where the storyline is heading, and being able to build off where things were in the past, or at least that's my hope. But I haven't felt hope like this in a long time. Finally, after over a decade, we finally got to see it. Way back at San Diego Comic-Con 2014, when announcing that Godzilla 2014 would get a sequel, as well as the fact that Legendary had acquired the rights to King Kong, a little promo video was played. A promo which hyped up the new Skull Island movie. Now, a promo image was released for this that has floated around online for years, and it looks very much like Peter Jackson's Kong. A King Kong that is very much in line with that, because originally when Legendary acquired the script, it was like a pseudo prequel to Peter Jackson's King Kong, and it was actually Jordan Vogt-Roberts who pivoted it into being the movie that it was. But in 2014, Scanline VFX put together a little showcase, giving some idea of the tone and style that they were thinking of making the movie in, and it featured a Kong which became the proto-MonsterVerse Kong. And as you'll see, this little show reel, it has a lot of influence on the MonsterVerse as a whole. A couple variations of this have been online leaked over the years, and this one actually doesn't match one-to-one with any of those. This is a brand new finalized version, and this is supposedly the version that was played at Comic-Con. The music overall is very King Kong 2005, and you jump right on in with a King Kong 2005 styled wall, which is pretty epic. Although it is not the Kong 2005 wall, it looks a little 76 and a little 33 as well. It's just clearly set on Skull Island, giving you a bit of an indication of where we are. I really like that it's got all these shots of monkeys and stuff swinging around, which I actually think were direct inspirations for the eventual shot of the dragonfly from Kong Skull Island. It's also got some river monsters showing how dangerous Skull Island is, which is pretty cool as well. And then it's got a shot which is pretty much directly used in Kong Skull Island, where we find Skull Mountain and zoom on in past the nose, which breaks, revealing a waterfall, and into the eye, where in Kong Skull Island we find Kong sitting watching the northern lights. This is pretty much used one-to-one in Kong Skull Island. I think it's so awesome to see where it started. Finally, we get the very iconic shot of Kong roaring and beating his chest in the rain, and he has so much weight and power in this. He looks so monstrous and scary here. This is the clip that there have been many iterations of leaked online over the years, and every time I see it, it looks awesome, and it never fails to get me hype. This was used as the direct inspiration for Kong's cameo in Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 1, and actually I found out Jordan Vogt-Roberts was pretty excited about that, and then it's revealed originally the movie was just going to be called Legendary's Skull Island. But after 11 years, we finally have payoff to what was shown at Comic-Con. I don't know why it took this long to finally show us, but the mystery has been solved. We finally got to see the Skull Island 2014 short. Alrighty, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you in the first place. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.